What do the dead know about what happens here? So let's get started. The Bible from the beginning already tells us in Ecclesiastes that at the time of death, there is a separation between the body and the soul. The same book of Ecclesiastes brings a very famous verse that says, "The living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing." Continuing, it is written that all their loves, their hatreds, their envies have no more part in this world, and nothing that happens under the sun. But hold on, is that the only verse the Bible has about the dead? You'll soon see that there are verses that say exactly the opposite. So how are we going to correctly understand the Bible, especially on such an important topic? What do the dead know about what happens here? So we find a source that implies that the dead know nothing. Also, the prophet Isaiah says in chapter 38, "I said, I will not again see the Lord in the land of the living. I will no longer look at humanity, nor be with those who now dwell in this world." So it seems there is a complete disconnection. The person died, and they have no more connection to this world. So we see some sources that give this impression. On the other hand, look at the book of Job. It is written there that the soul sees and feels the suffering of the body. In other words, what is happening to the body hurts it, and the soul grieves for the loss of its body. So how does the soul see what is happening to its body from up above? Another biblical case we have is King Saul. King Saul was facing a very dangerous war against the Philistines. The prophet Samuel had already died. He does not know what to do. So he goes to a woman, a witch, whom the Bible calls a Baalat Ov, which is the name of this type of witchcraft. He goes to this woman, and she brings up the soul of the prophet Samuel, who had already died. It is important to emphasize that Jewish tradition says it was not a demon that this woman brought, but rather the soul of the prophet Samuel, to the point that King Saul was disguised so as not to be recognized. And when she sees the soul of the prophet Samuel coming with great respect, she says, "You deceived me, you are Saul." He said, "It is true, and the reason I came is out of desperation, because I really do not know what to do. I do not know what will happen now. I know it is forbidden to seek this kind of solution, but I was desperate." And at this moment Samuel, already after life in this world, reveals to Saul, "You will die in this war, you and your sons, and you will be with me soon after, and the people of Israel will lose this battle against the Philistines." So we see here clearly that the prophet Samuel, after leaving this world, knows what was happening. So we see passages from the same Holy Bible that imply the dead know nothing. On the other hand, we have clear cases that they do know. So what is the truth? Do they know or not know? The answer is a bit complex. For this, I will use one of the stories from the Talmud, which will make it clearer for you. The Talmud tells a very interesting story of an extremely righteous person, that in years of famine and drought, a person knocks on his door, a poor man, hungry, asking for alms. He not only gives the money, but gives it in a very beautiful way. The wife of this very righteous person expels him from the house. And it was exactly the day of the Jewish New Year. He now has no place to stay because his wife is angry with him, and he goes to sleep in the cemetery. The Talmud tells that when he was in the cemetery, suddenly he hears the voice of two spirits. The exact word is spirits, not souls, but spirits which are part, let's say, of the middle of the soul. We have a video where I explain the 5 parts of the soul, the 5 levels of the soul. It is very important to understand. This second level is called spirit. In Hebrew, it is called ruach. And actually, he understands that they were 2 girls who had been buried. One comes to the other and says, "This is the day of the new year. On this day, divine decrees come out. Come with me. Let's see what decrees will happen this year in the world, economic decrees." And the other says, "I cannot go. I am buried with straw in an ugly way. I cannot get out of here." What a strange thing, isn't it? We will continue the story and soon we will explain. So the first goes, and she sees everything that will happen that year. She returns, and the soul that stayed asks, "What did you manage to see?" And she replies, I saw that this year people will want to plant quickly. Those who plant directly in the first rain will lose everything because hail will come and destroy the crop." That righteous person heard that. And that year, all the people who had gone through years of drought and famine, now they will plant in the first rain. Except him, he plants in the second rain. And when the hail came, he had not yet planted. Everyone lost their crops, he did not. The following year, he sleeps on the same day, that is, on the same night, the night of the new year, when God reveals the decrees in the same place, and he hears the two spirits, two souls talking, and one says to the other, "Let's go. Let's see what the decrees are this year." "But I already told you, I cannot. I am buried in straw. I am ashamed." And the other said, "I will go. I will tell you." And she goes. When she returns, the soul that stayed asks, "And now what did you see this year?" She says, "What I saw that those who plant this year in the second rain will lose everything. Only those who plant in the first rain will be fine, because a plague will come. So those who plant in the first rain, their plant will already be strong, and it will be able to withstand the plague that will come. But those who plant in the second rain, the plant will still be very weak, very early. The plague will win." Now, people were afraid of the last year when there was that hail, so they went to plant in the second rain. That righteous person, he plants in the first. And once again, what happens? His crop is enormously successful, and everyone's is not. His wife is suspicious. What is happening? How do you manage to make this crop work? And everyone else's fails. And he tells his wife. So he revealed to her what had happened since that first year. And then the Talmud tells that one day the wife of this righteous man, with the mother of that person who had been buried in straw, were arguing. They were shouting at each other, arguing, until the wife of the righteous man says to the mother of that girl, "Who are you to argue with me? You who buried your daughter in straw." No one knew this, and the mother is shocked. The argument ends. The following year, this righteous person goes for the third time to sleep in the cemetery on the New Year, on the night of the Jewish New Year. And then, when he goes to listen to the two spirits, what they are going to say. This year, what will happen? One says to the other, "Let's see what the decrees are." And she says, "Be quiet. The living know what is happening. They are listening to what we are saying." From this story, we understand that these two souls knew what was going to happen in this world. They knew what was going to happen with the crops. In other words, in the economic world. On the other hand, it is very strange. To begin with, we are talking about souls in a cemetery. The place of spirits is not in the cemetery. They are in the higher worlds. It may be that they have to go through purification in hell first. And for you to understand this well, we have an excellent video on the channel. And then go to the world of souls, until the moment of the world to come arrives. But then what is happening? What is happening is that, if you notice well, they are two spirits of people who in this world were extremely materialistic. We see this on the one hand. She is worried, so to speak, about her clothing after she died. It is because she had this concern in life, but in an exaggerated way, the same thing. What do they want to know that happens in this world? The financial part, the monetary part. But they no longer have bank accounts. They no longer have to worry. But this was a wrong value that entered their souls. So these are very low souls who knew what was happening here. And now we begin to understand the biblical verses we studied earlier. The solution to our question is that there are souls that are very low. And indeed, it may be that they will know what is happening here. But this is horrible for them. Because instead of being in proximity to God, on much higher levels, with pleasures that cannot even be described with words in this world, they are thinking, who will make money? What clothes am I wearing? On the other hand, we also learn, as we saw in the book of Job, that there is some information that even elevated souls know about what happens here. We will give two examples. One example is exactly the person's body. On the one hand, the person's body is not very important to the soul, because the soul is the one that lives forever. The body is material, it decays. On the other hand, the body was the clothing of the soul. Through the body we can do kindness, commandments, and so on. So a soul that knows what happens to its body, especially because the body was the home of the soul in this world. Moreover, if it was very attached to what happened to its body, then it feels much more the pain of the loss of the body. A person who was more spiritualized will feel this less. The case of the prophet Samuel is another example, because the prophet Samuel, who was a prophet, a righteous person, whose level of spirituality we cannot even fathom. So how did he know what was happening, if he was a person so close to the Creator? The answer is that here we are talking about something very important, even for a soul that is up above. The prophet Samuel was one of the judges, one of the leaders of the people of Israel, who cared for the people spiritually in their wars, also in the economic part. And now he comes and is asked what will happen. He knows, because this is connected to his soul. But here it is a special level, not the level of materialism, and not like a football championship, who will win, but rather the spiritual level of the people of Israel, to know if they are ready to win a war or not. So, it is information that in fact is spiritual information. In summary, what we see is the following. In Ecclesiastes, we see that indeed there are souls that know nothing. Certainly these souls forget silly loves they had here, or hatreds, angers, jealousies, envies. This no longer touches a normal soul, unless it was an extremely materialistic person. That is what King Solomon revealed to us in Ecclesiastes. A normal soul no longer has this knowledge. This is also what we see in Isaiah, that these souls, the path of the soul that God made, is that it no longer has a connection with this material world and all its will. All its pleasure is in approaching God in a much greater way than existed in this world. On the other hand, when we see verses that say that there are souls that feel the pain of the body and grieve while their body is being destroyed, then we are seeing that these are souls that, during their life in this world, were so materialistic that they still care about what happens in part of this world. And in fact, this is part of their punishment, the consequence of their wrong acts and wrong values they had in their life. And now, in a correct way, you understand the Bible. You understand that there are verses that imply that indeed souls do not know, and others that show that souls do know. And in fact, they are not contradictory, they are complementary. We are talking about levels of souls, levels of people, and therefore some will know some things and others will not know. Another interesting thing to learn is exactly from the case of the prophet Samuel, because he was concerned with the people of Israel. So says the Zohar, that a person who has great love for their family, the important things that happen to their family, a wedding, the birth of a child, they will know. It is also written in the Zohar that when a person goes to pray to God at the tomb of a relative, this soul is notified that a relative of yours is there praying to God. So we see that the answer is complex. There is knowledge that the dead know about what happens here. There is knowledge that they do not know, depending more than anything on what theme we are talking about and what the level of this soul is.